Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, March 31st meeting of the Finance Committee. As per the last few weeks, we'll be conducting this meeting virtually, so I will begin the meeting by reading the following statement. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated 3/16/2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call of attendance will be taken. Okay, so let's go through the Finance Committee membership. Mr. Murphy?
Yes, Vin Murphy here.
Okay. Ms. Zemer?
Michelle Zemer here.
Okay. Mr. Maxwell?
Mr. Maxwell here.
Okay. Ms. Nersessian?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Alfred?
Mr. Alfred here.
Okay. And Mr. Sparrow?
Mr. Sparrow is here.
Okay, good. So we have full attendance of the Finance Committee, so let's get this show on the road. Our one last remaining budget review for this cycle, before we start tearing the budgets apart again for all this virus stuff, is the Select Board. So we have Mr. Ritter on the call to talk about the Select Board budget. The first question I would ask before you begin, Jeff, is the budget you're presenting the one that we received in February?
I believe it is.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So just for the membership, if you're not sure, if you go back, I'm trying to see what day this was, but there was an email.
You should read our requested budget number is $317,372.
Yes, that is correct. So for members, you can also find this on the town's website. If you go under Boards and Committees, Finance, on the left side, you'll see something that says FY21 Budget Reviews. If you click on that, a budget review schedule, if you click on that and scroll down, you'll see that like, I think it was February 11th was their original scheduled date. On that, there will be a link to the budget that Jeff's going to talk about. So, okay, so Mr. Ritter, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, very good. So we have 4 cost centers under the Selectmen's budget. Professional services, purchased services, supplies and materials, and other expenses. Those are the 4 cost centers that we have. The first is professional services, which I will just tell you that the entire budget is in flux at the moment, given my pending retirement. Mm-hmm. So we do not have a clear understanding as to what my salary or my successor's salary will be, but I can tell you that it's going to be probably substantially more than what is presented to you at the moment at $131,825. Okay. Probably 20,000 more, at least. The second item is the purchased services line item, which really includes town council. We have several items of litigation that are underway. We have 2 union contracts that are under negotiations at the moment. We have the police union and we have the DPW union that are active, and we have no way of knowing what's going to happen with those. We have litigation at 194 Lowland Street, and we have a age discrimination litigation matter that's out there and working its way through the court system. And we have various tax titles and street acceptance that needs to get through to the registry. The registry get those accepted. So, and we also have the Sun Edison settlement agreement that is out there. So we have a lot of litigation that's out there. That's why the bump in the the purchase services is out there, and shows an increase of 21.43%. like snow and ice, we never know what's going to come at us, and you can budget for what is there, or you can budget for what you think is there. And I presented what I think is coming, and that's what is there. The supplies and materials are, a $50 increase. That's nothing as far as I'm concerned. And the professional development is level funded at $5,700.
Okay. Okay, do you have anything else you wish to say, or do you want to just open it up for questions?
Open up for questions.
Okay, so we'll go down the list here. Mr. Murphy?
Jeff, what goes into professional development?
What is under professional development?
Yes, please. What usually gets spent there? What type of classes and things like that?
Yeah, again, when you hire a new town administrator, this number is probably going to jump. It's been flat pretty much for the past 5 years, but this would probably include attendance at the MMA annual meeting, the ICMA meeting, which happens nationally, which is easily $5,000 to go to. So that's what it is.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Making me go back to this other window.
But I will just note that in 5 years, I've never optioned to take part in that.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Ziemer.
Just a quick question. Do you anticipate salary overlap between you and the new person, or is it just going to be an increase in salary?
I think it's going to be just an increase in salary. The selectmen have not talked to me about any kind of overlap, although I might be open to that discussion because I think it would be helpful. But at the moment, we're looking at just a seamless transition from one to the other.
Right, and just for the record, I would just interrupt here and point out that we should probably be tempered on the salary discussion, right? Because because of for obvious reasons. So just keep that in mind. So.
Right. That's why I wasn't asking about that. Are you able to discuss, for the same reason I'm not asking specifics about litigation, except is litigation just starting, or are we on tail end of litigation? Because
no,
we're in litigation.
Yeah, no, we're in active litigation with several of these items.
All right, then don't say anything more about it. Okay, I had no further questions then.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Nersessian.
Yeah. Hi, Jeff. The only question I just wanted to follow up on on Vin's original question on the professional development, just on the expenses that are in there so far for this year. What are those for? And do you think you're going to get up to the $5,700 appropriated amount for this year? And if so, what's left?
Yeah. Well, we've have an appropriation of $5,700. And we've expended as of December 31st, $3,914, and that is mostly for membership to the MMA, the Massachusetts Municipal Association, and also for the Metro West Regional Collaborative. The remaining amount is for meetings that I don't attend, but it's there for me to attend if I want to.
Okay. And if we looked back into 2019, where we had $5,150 that was expended, did you attend the meeting that year, or were other expenses put into 2019? So last year.
In 2019, I probably attended several meetings. That's what would count for that.
Okay. So really the delta then would be those other meetings. Okay, thank you. That's it, Ken. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would just caution the Finance Committee and whoever from the selectmen are listening, that number is probably going to increase with a new hire. Just FYI.
Okay.
But I do think that I think that, once we understand who's coming in and what the expenses are that would be needed, that would be a separate, I think, potentially we would need something separate to understand. Perhaps they've already gotten professional development if we're getting someone who's already been in a position beforehand. So we don't know that yet.
Yeah, I can just tell you that it's the custom for managers to, attend international meetings. So that I'm just telling you as a cautionary note that number is going to increase.
Okay.
I'm sorry, again, this is Sue again.
Good.
One other question, because I think Jeff just said that they attend international meetings. Did I mishear? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So why would a town administrator need to attend an international meeting? What's the driver around that?
Well, it's a certification for being a town administrator or a city manager.
And they do that at an international level?
National level, not well.
Oh,
it's
national.
called
Okay.
it's called the International City Managers Association. It's all in the United States or Canada.
Okay, thank you.
And I've never participated in that in the 5 years I've been in Holliston, by the way.
Okay. Are you all set, Sue?
I am, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Mr. Alfred?
Yeah. So, I appreciate you trying to sort of warn us about what expenses may be to come, but let's just put it this way: there's not going to be a lot that's going to be increasing next year. So, let's just temper. Maybe some line items might need to increase, then others will unfortunately have to decrease in its stead. And I think any new hire will understand that perhaps in the first year they may not be able to go to every conference that they want to. So. I'm not really worried about that line item. My only real question is last week the Finance Committee voted unanimously to recommend to the Board of Selectmen and to yourself that we suspend all discretionary spending. And I was just wondering if that I didn't get a chance to watch the Select Board meeting, but wondering if that was taken up, was considered, if the Select Board has taken any actions, you yourself have taken any actions. Anything around that you can tell me?
Yes, it was. And I assume that is applicable to also the school committee.
Yes, that was the vote.
That wasn't my question. What did the Select Board decide?
They voted to endorse your recommendation.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any questions about the budget, Mr. Alfred?
No questions about the budget.
Okay. Mr. Sparrow?
Hi. My only question is just about the revenue line. What is in that revenue line?
There is no revenue line at the moment. The revenue line used to be for the rental of the town hall, and we have discontinued the rental of the town hall until the septic system has been addressed.
Got it. Okay. That's my only question. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay. So as I said, this is very straightforward. I mean, I think that, to echo Mr. Alfred's comments, right, this and all the other budgets are going to have to be, relooked at. We're going to have to, as a finance committee, take a look at some of these in light of the current situation once we start to get clarity on where the economics of everything are going. But thank you very much, Mr. Ritter, for this request. And I guess this is the last time you'll be presenting a budget to us. So thank you for your service over the last several years. And hopefully your successor will pick up the torch, and we'll look forward to him or her next year. So.
Appreciate your comments.
Yep. Okay, so now, if there are no further questions on the select board budget, let's move on to the warrant articles. Now, the first question I would ask, Jeff, is I haven't seen an updated warrant in some time now. I may have missed it because there's been a whole, obviously with all the flurry of activity going on. But what is the latest version, or have you sent out, do we have the latest version of the warrant?
Yes, sir. I sent it out to you on Friday.
Okay, let me just check my email and pull it up here. So,
Select Board last night voted to endorse a recommendation from Stantec, which had 4 recommendations for improvements to our infrastructure. Unfortunately, I do not have them immediately in front of me, but I'm not sure if John's on the call or not, but he might be able to shed some light on that.
yeah, he called me on my way over here and said he'd be a few minutes late. So, but that's okay because that'll give me a chance. I just forwarded out to the members the draft that Jeff sent me on Friday. I didn't see it in my email, otherwise I would have sent it earlier. But that was my fault.
I took a pretty draconian stab at the warrant and reduced spending very, very significantly,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm sure the Finance Committee would appreciate. However, I don't want to get in between the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen about spending necessarily.
Right.
But, I have a inkling as to where we're heading, and I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, I'm pulling it up now, and I presume most of the committee is probably pulling it up now, so.
Ken, it's Dan Albert.
Yep.
You took a reduction to spend. I'm just not sure what that means and in what line items and what am I missing?
You're asking Jeff, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't have the document in front of me, but I recommended a very severe cut in spending, including the capital expenditure article, and several of the selectmen's expense articles. I am in the middle of this discussion, and I don't want to get in the middle of it, but I made my recommendations. I made my recommendations to the board, and they can do what they want with it, and you can do with it what you want with it.
Okay.
It's odd that you would slash a request from another department like the school committee and put that in a document.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, well, we are in odd times, and I've been here before with 9C cuts, and I know what it's about. And you need to, I might be overreacting, but you need to figure out how you're going to tighten your belt in a very significant way.
Sure, and spending money on sidewalking.
Okay, hold on, Sue. Okay.
I mean, come on.
Advisory committees and things that. Come on, this is.
Okay, hang on. Let me just make a couple of points here. If you look at what Jeff sent, he sent a draft of the warrant and he sent a list of recommended cuts. The draft of the warrant does not reflect those cuts yet. Okay.
That's correct.
So we should not focus on the cuts because even though we may be for or against some of them, right, the select board has to take the first pass at the warrant, right? So
that's correct.
So let's leave that part out of it for now. And focus. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Sessom.
Jeff, could I just ask you a quick question? The first document in the email that says recommended expense reductions, are the recommended expense reductions only those that are crossed through, or is it the entirety of that page?
No, it's only those that are crossed through. That was only my first cut at it. There could be more, or there could be less. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and the other thing I would say, just with regards to this, is that I did have a call with Pooja yesterday. As I mentioned last week, I had scheduled a call with her to get some insight on the financial implications, if the state had any knowledge of what was going to happen with the budget process and so forth. And the couple of tidbits I can share with you are that first, she said that both the House and the Senate and the governor have kind of talked about, what to do about the budget, and they're all in agreement that their goal in the short term is to hold FY20 harmless, because they understand that cutting, doing 9C cuts this late in the year will have a tremendous impact on towns. So she, obviously she's, these things are not official, but her guidance was that, you shouldn't be panicking about FY20 because, they're more likely to make FY20 whole and then, get the pound of flesh, so to speak, in FY21.
Ken?
Yes.
Michelle Zimmer here. That's why I had my hand up, because I heard Jeff say 9C, and all of a sudden I was worried about FY20.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to say that.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility, right? Anything's possible. We don't know how this is going to play out, but she did say that there's a recognition that the first goal is to keep FY20 intact. Okay. As far as where we go, what she said was that the state, as we all know, right, in December of every year, the state gets the Council of Elders, so to speak, to get together and do the revenue projections, and that's the basis. That forms the basis of the governor's budget, right? She said that they are attempting to reconvene that group to update the revenue estimates given the situation. Her expectation is that will happen sometime in the next several weeks. Now, how they do it, she said the logistics of, how do you get everybody together? Is it a conference call, whatever? They're working that out. But she expected that within sometime in April, there will be essentially a revisit of what they did in December to account for the virus. And she said that will essentially kick off the entire budget process again from scratch. That basically they'll convene, they'll update the revenue number, and then the governor will make a new proposal. And then from there, so she said they don't really have a timeline yet, because step one is get this revenue projection, and they're kind of trying to get that together. And once they have that, then there's going to be some discussion of how they proceed from the state level. I tried to get some information. I said to her, do you have any, are you hearing any clues? Like, are we looking at 20% local aid cuts, 5% local aid cuts, whatever? And she said they're not even that far down the path yet. She said it all depends on where this revenue estimate comes out. So she said they are getting anecdotal data, the early data. Obviously, they see things like sales tax collections and so forth, so they know that there's an economic hit, and nobody's blind to the fact that you can, with everybody home, that's going to have a big economic impact. So she wasn't able to give me any real specifics, but she did say that the two key points I wanted to make was the expectation is FY20 will remain whole, and that the budget process at the state level will kick off again in April once they have this revenue number. So, it's very unlikely we're going to have a state budget by July 1. And if that happens, the prevailing wisdom is that they're going to go essentially the equivalent of the federal government with a continuing resolution for a month by month for a couple of months till they finish. But again, right now they're predicating this all on, the surge in cases happening over the next few weeks and how long that lasts and when, so we can argue that, but it's all speculation at this point until the tide turns with the virus. So we'll see. So anyway, so that's the good news in the sense is that we might be able to finish out FY20 intact. So, okay. Now, from the select board, do we have Mr. Cronin or any other select board members online yet?
I can. I just joined.
Okay. Mr. Cronin, do you want to talk about? So we have the warrant articles to talk about, and there are a couple that are. I know there are a couple that you particularly wanted to discuss, but I was just taking a quick pass through the warrant, and there are a couple that I wanted to just get the select boards, and I'm sure that for the entire committee's sake, with things like Article 5, the town clerk compensation, Articles 5 and 6. Do you want to explain anything with respect to those articles? We understand the reason for it, but the numbers you came up with and so forth, and what the basis was for those determinations.
Sure. Briefly, the articles will reflect the FY21 base salary that we would have provided for the town clerk in FY20. So that new article will set her base salary. The second article, give me, Ken, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's Article 6.
It's 6, yes.
Would show a retroactive amount that would have come her way against that base salary for FY20. I think members of the committee know that she was not part of the FY20 exercise because of the article withdrawal last October.
Okay, so that amount in Article 6 is the amount she would have received had the adjustment that the select board wanted to make been implemented at the same time as the other adjustments?
That's right.
Okay, so that doesn't represent a full year. That's the part year that everybody else got.
That's right.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay.
I think it's about, was it around 6?
It was according to the draft I have, it's $6,798.
Yep, that number was sourced from Mary Biscay.
Okay. Okay, and then we have, let's see, we know about that. Let's see, then we go through the, I'm just looking through the warrant here. Just give me a second.
No problem.
Okay, so the capital, do you want to talk about the capital? This is the Article 6, the capital, and just the select board sponsored capital requests. I know some of these we know about, but yep, good.
I just need you to coach me up on which item because I don't have the warrant in front of me, Ken.
That's fine. The first one is the 1750 Washington Street improvements. That's, I assume, is the handicap ramp.
It is.
If I can just jump in here
Go
for
ahead.
a minute, I'm Jeff. I think that the most recent recommendation to the Board of Selectmen was to defer that appropriation until October.
Is that just because of the fiscal picture, or was there another reason for that, Jeff?
No, it's just a fiscal picture. If we had the money, we would do it. I just don't think it's appropriate at the moment.
Yeah, Jeff, our board hasn't voted on that yet, though.
No, that's true. That's true. But I'm just telling you that's my recommendation because I know the road you're heading down, and you need every penny you can get.
Okay. So, okay, well let's go through. I mean, obviously all of this is subject to change, but I want to make sure that we get from the select board while you guys are here the rationale behind some of these. So there was another one. There was a dual purpose trackless MT7 tractor. I assume that came from Mr. Reese?
Yep. DP. Yep, that's a replacement item.
Okay, and that should be on the asset management spreadsheet, I assume.
He confirmed that last week when he spoke to you folks. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm recommending that be deleted from there.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm not. I want to get the information on all this, even if it ends up going away, because the select board has not yet voted on it, and I don't want to have to come back later and figure out what you voted on and what you didn't. So let's just get all the information now.
Yep. Yep. Got it.
Okay. So the next thing, Mr. Cronin, was a video detection system.
That item, I believe, is an older item that was relative to the traffic study report. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yes, it is. And again, I recommended that be deleted until October.
Okay.
That system would provide Holliston PD with video, live feed video of the intersection at Washington Street.
Yep.
Okay. Senior center improvements, that we know from before. That was that's the same set of improvements that was on the last warrant, I assume?
It is. We've talked to some members of your committee who've been at our meetings to find out if the Finance Committee intends to deal with the remaining items from that list in FY20. Mm-hmm. We were told by, I think, Bob Nemeth that one of the items that made up that list has already been addressed.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you've heard from the Council on Aging. What Mr. Ritter is doing here is just a placeholder, but
yes,
there may be further information, and we look to the Finance Committee to find out if you intend to resolve the remaining pieces with FY20 resources. I'd ask Ben Sparrow to chime in here because I think Ben said originally that it was going to be some consideration using a $200,000 set aside in FY20 to look at that.
Yeah, my recollection. This is Ben, by the way. My recollection was that we had set aside some money and we wanted to talk with a future facilities manager, and we wanted part of what we wanted with the senior center improvements was there was some particular improvements that needed to be done immediately. I don't remember the specifics, like it was a health or safety or something along that line, and we needed it to be parsed out of the original quote, and in order to be able to figure out what we needed to do or if we needed to do it. When I spoke to Bob Nemeth, he told me he had started working on that, but this is just him telling me. I don't know officially from the senior center what is actually going on, what the quote consists of, and what they need. And that's, I think we need that before we can decide what to do financially.
Ben, do you want, I would recommend you reach out to Mr. Keast, our new facility manager, to refresh that information and provide your committee with updated information. Because I think it should be cleaned up in FY20 rather than placed in the FY21 warrant.
So this is Sue Nersessian. Can I just jump in here? So I'm not sure exactly how Bob Nemeth is involved in the COA, and we had the COA in last week. Some of what's in that number that's sitting here are expenses, which we talked about, and they're not capital items. We talked about that last fall. So we can certainly go back to the COA. I would have assumed someone who's putting this on the warrant that perhaps someone else would have reached out rather than having us do the reach out, because the budgeting isn't us. But we can certainly reach back out and get that list again and pass it along to you so you can figure out what should go in the capital, if anything, for this spring.
Who is the COA liaison for the FinCom?
Both Michelle and myself.
Yes.
And, okay, so we are holding this for them. And I understand you heard from them last week, correct?
Yep. Yes.
Did they make reference to any of, did they make reference to any of these needs, Sue?
They didn't, and they didn't have it in their budget, but they do have in the budget they presented. But when Michelle and I met with them, I mean, some of these are just normal expenses. They're not capital items. They push them all into one sort of capital number, but they really aren't capital.
And this is Michelle Zemer. And some of them, like ceiling tiles, are fire code issues. It's not just
correct.
Like in the clinic.
Yeah, and that's being worked. And that's being worked on right now. So.
Right. That's what we talked about in the fall.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's fair. That's how, then that makes sense, Ben. I didn't understand how Bob was involved in what he was doing.
I think we're trying to, as proxy, to the point, we're trying to help COA clean up this item that, right, was originally put out there in October. To Ben Carroll's point, is the Finance Committee interested in addressing this with FY20 resources? If they are, this item falls off the table for 21.
So this is Jeff Rutter. Just FYI, I have recommended this be pulled off the warrant under the capital expenditure appropriation. And also, we have a request into the state legislature to fund these improvements.
Thanks, Jeff. Back to my question. And Sue, are you folks interested in an FY20 item on this one?
I think what we're interested in is making sure we understand what the item is, and then we're going to decide what we do about it. Right? There were some. When this was on in October, there was some amount of it, which we just discussed, right, that were safety issues. We wanted those to be addressed. Others were more cosmetic, and I think that was the issue we had in the fall was that it wasn't capital; it was building maintenance, right? So So we need to find out, and maybe this is something for Sue and Michelle to follow up on, is to just check with the COA on what is in that amount that still needs to be done, what is really capital, what is not capital, and we can then, as a committee, they can bring it back to the committee for us to discuss as to whether we want to address it now or later.
Sounds like a plan to
Sue
me.
and I, this is Michelle Zimmer. Sue and I can discuss that offline, and we can get back to you.
Yeah.
Right, Sue?
Yeah, that's fine. So there was carpet in there of 8,613. Again, these are what was in the fall. Another set of carpet for $6,400, and then $48,000 to John Gagnon, but it didn't break it out as to what that was.
Right.
So Jeff has all that information because it was submitted to him back, we were told, on September 26, 2019. So I don't know if they want to pull, if perhaps it would be good to go back and grab that information.
Yeah.
I've got it.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have a plan for dealing with that senior center improvement line. Okay, the wastewater treatment plant, evaluation and repairs, that we did know about. I think, Jeff, you told us about that earlier. That's the pump replacement and so forth that was needed over there,
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yeah, as Sean Reese will say, you got to invest in your infrastructure if you want to maintain it.
Okay. So the library repairs and improvement, what is that?
This is Dan. Can I just ask a question about
Sure,
that, though,
sure.
before we even get into
Okay,
what it is?
which one?
The library repairs.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
This was an item that was requested by an independent elected board. I'm not sure. I mean, I would think that would be something just like the school article that would probably need to go. We should discuss with them. I'm not saying it's not something we wouldn't want to do necessarily. I'm not sure, just like with budgets, if it's something that
Right. No. I agree. I'll be completely forthright here. The only reason I'm bringing these up is because they're listed as select board, right? If they were listed as library trustees, then I'd say we get the library trustees in here. And if that's
I don't know who decides how to list them, but
No. To your point, though, right? If it's, I thought it was when I see select board, I assume that the request has gone through the select board and that they have put it on the warrant because they are in support of it. Because even though the library has a board of trustees, the select board does review their budget, I believe. So the
Ken?
Yep.
Ken, Jeff, here. That might be my error. I need to refocus that and put it to library trustees.
Okay. So then we'll skip that one then. The SUV, I think it's self-explanatory. The SUV for the facilities manager.
Sure.
Okay, and then for the removal of the structure off Woodland Street, I know there was a little bit of an email exchange about that, but can you give us more background? Because didn't we just approve money in October for what I thought was the removal of the structure?
Yep. This is Jeff. Town meeting approved $25,000 for the removal of the structure at 260 Woodland Street, and that was based on a recommendation from the Department of Public Works superintendent, and it was discovered after the fact that there were some environmental issues that were involved with the project, and so we need to address those. DEP is involved. Our facilities manager is involved, and we're working to get it resolved.
Okay. So then this 110, what is the basis for that 110 then? Is that?
We received 4 quotations from 4 vendors, 4 providers to remove the structures that were an imminent public safety hazard at that location off the rail trail, and that's what the number is based on. And we are now currently, as we speak, we are out to bid for a formal bid, so we'll have a hard number for town meeting.
Okay. Okay, so that's okay. Now,
I apologize.
go ahead. Were you about to say something, Jeff?
I was just going to say I apologize because, I mean, I thought we had it nailed down, at a good number, small number, but apparently it's not.
Okay.
My mistake.
Okay. Well, the issue there, I mean, obviously, when you find these things, it limits our ability to our course of action. If there's an environmental issue there, so.
It's an environmental issue,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. So according to your email this morning, the bids are going to be open on April 22nd. So we will have clarity on the number around that time.
Exactly, sir.
Okay.
And this is Dan.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Alfred.
Can we just get some more information at some point? I don't need to now about what exactly the environmental issues are, what the timeliness of it are. I mean, it's just, it's always frustrating when you go in and have a $25,000 project that turns into a $135,000 project. And if that is something that truly needs to be dealt with, like immediately, like there's contaminants that are leaking into the water, the water system, or if it's something that needs to be dealt with, but to be dealt with at a later date. I don't know. I'm not asking that we need that answer today. I'm just saying that, like, before we kind of make a decision and vote on it, that's the kind of information that I would like to sort of get some more clarity on.
Yeah. So if you could, Jeff, you can just send an email to the committee with some outlining more of the details of what was found and so forth. That might be.
We are under orders of DEP to have it removed.
Okay. Well, that answers your question, Mr. Alfred.
Well, did they give us? Was there a time frame that was put on the order? Was there?
No.
Okay, so
no time frame has been structured yet. It just has to be done immediately or as soon as possible.
Okay, Mr. Cronin, I think you were trying to say something.
Yeah, to Mr. Alfred's question, it's a good question. The contaminant is asbestos-containing waste material, likely part of the structures that were in place. When the structures were removed, the ACWM was found on site. What DEP does is they assess what the scope of that contamination is, and it's all surface-related ACM. There is no threat to the groundwater or anything like that, Dan. It's building product came down when the structures were removed.
So is it? I mean, so that's good to hear. I mean, is it floating in the air? Given that asbestos is obviously something that.
No,
okay.
Mr. Keith has sent us pictures. The site is secure, as Mr. Ritter indicated, per DEP. Dumpsters and the piles are draped with plastic, and they're monitored daily. And pictures are taken, and as Mr. Ritter said, per DEP guidelines, it's controlled and monitored by them. They are aware. They wanted us to clean this up right quick, but they are aware that we're going to need town meeting resources now in June to move forward, and they've indicated support for that time frame. But there's no threat to the public today. The site was secured by DPW facility people, so there's no threat to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So this is Jeff. I would hope, and my expectation is that this would remain in the warrant because this is a emergency and unforeseen expense that needs to be taken care of in town.
Okay. Any questions from the Finance Committee about that one article? I mean, that one issue, I should say, not article. Wrong choice of words there. Okay, if not, we'll move on. So if you go down further in the warrant, then we run into Article 19, which is the sidewalk prioritization plan. So who? I don't know if Mr. Cronin, you want to speak to that, or do you want? I understand Ms. Hines on also.
Sure, I'd like to explain.
Okay.
First, I'm hoping each member of your committee received the document that I sent along this morning. The Select Board approved of this document last evening. It reflects an update from what you saw last fall. There are two items I want to draw your attention to. The first is the plan now specifically for water main improvements draws from existing proprietary information that the town paid for in 2010 under the Water Asset Management Plan. Using that data, Intech is proposing to review all completed road projects to date, as well as an analysis of critical analysis of water main breaks, leak history, and so forth. We've asked them, following that visioning session we had back in February or March, we confronted the debt schedule, to look at the water main replacement program in two chunks, a 10-year chunk and a 20-year chunk. The hope is that we will be given some financial options to evaluate this particular project over a 10-year plan so as not to collide or overlap too much with a proposed high school plan, which I think everybody understands is some years away. By Dr. Jackson's estimate, the high school is roughly 4 to 7 years away from actuation. So we think that some modified 10-year plan might be something that we could work with on the capital side. That's one other major change from the fall program. This particular program, we've added timelines to each item. This particular one is 6 to 9 months at a budget cost of $40,000. Water supply planning piece, that's a new item. Last fall, I believe it was the chairman of the Finance Committee made a recommendation the town should be focused on sourcing future well water. It has been roughly 10 years since we brought the last well online, and we recognize the process of undertaking a technical review can take many years, and so item number 2 would begin that process. It would likely be funded from the water retained earnings account, by the way. It's slated to be $15,000, and this study will take 3 to 6 months to give us a roadmap towards our next water source. The sidewalk prioritization plan. This one draws more detail from existing programs. I recall some polite debate at the fall town meeting regarding sourcing existing grants or programs, i.e. the Complete Streets program, the Safe Routes to Schools, to name 2. We want to make sure through the study that we're evaluating any possible source of funding that can help us prioritize and pay for sidewalk improvements within the town. This particular project will be hand in hand with the water pipe replacement plan and also have a 10, 20-year option study. This item is also 6 to 9 months out for a total projected cost of $40,000. Finally, the DPW facility study is reminiscent of what you saw in the fall. This item is also 6 to 9 months. It's a $50,000 study. It involves review of the existing structures at Arch Street and Central Street. I believe I mentioned to you folks that we were going to do a deeper dive on the history of both locations, the repairs, the investments to date. I can tell you that I went through the building inspector's file for both properties. I believe the Arch Street property received an upgrade or an update somewhere in the 80s, but it was an originally constructed building back in 1960 for $40,000. The foundry on Central Street is in dreadful condition. The roof under which many of the workers perform their daily functions is an old roof that has leaks and holes in it. The environment, the property is long past useful life. As you probably also know, it co-hosts one of Holliston's fire department outlets. They have one garage assigned to the fire department there. I encourage any member of the Finance Committee to take a tour of either of these facilities to find out how in tough shape our public works really are. If we're going to invest in our infrastructure, we need to invest in a facility that combines both functions under one roof. An argument I made last fall. I feel pretty strongly about it. It's really striking when you see these facilities that our public workers have been enduring these conditions for that long. So I'm trying to be brief, Ken. I hope you can understand that. I wanted to be concise with some of the changes that we brought into the plan for your consideration this spring.
Okay. Well, for these, I know that there are several members of the committee that have questions about the study project, so I'll go through the roster. Mr. Murphy, we'll start with you.
I already spoke to John about this. I'll just bring it up so everybody's aware. I just asked, do we have to use this company? But why are we getting a quote just for one if we're going to go out there? And my concern would be if we actually put it out there and it gets approved, then people are going to do an RFP. They're going to get pretty close, if not exactly, to what we have approved. So John was going to go talk to Sean, though he did mention that they already know they did the original water study, so probably have some sort of cost benefit of having them do that portion. The other portions, maybe we can have other organizations do it. The other question I would have is if we had to prioritize things, let's say we can't do it all at once, what would be the priorities of the select board?
Ben, can you clarify your question when you say priorities? Are you talking about the studies or the capital projects after that?
No, just the studies, not so much. Like, do they all have to get done at once? Or if we could choose, let's say we do the water stuff first, and then we worry about the other two things. Now, I don't disagree. I've driven by. I've never actually been to the foundry. It looks horrible from the outside. I'm just imagining what it is on the inside. I appreciate that. It's just you and I know what the environment's going to be come the spring, and we're just looking at costs. So, yeah, if you can say, yep, let's do this versus that, what would you say?
No, pretty rational question. It's just me then. Our board hasn't prioritized this item, so I can only give my opinion. I would probably suggest that the water main improvement plan and the sidewalk plan should be done at the same time. There's a defined nexus between those two projects. I would suggest that the water supply planning piece, it's short money. It's an alternative funding source. It can stand on its own. And if you had to decouple any of them, the DPW feasibility study is also a standalone exercise. My personal opinion is we need to look at them all at the same time, Vince, because they're all intertwined to some extent. But I think I gave you an answer there that says water main improvements and sidewalks should be prioritized. The other pieces can be decoupled and thought of independently. Does that help?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Thanks. And that's it.
Okay. Ms. Ziemer?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with toggling my mute here. Could you discuss the alternative, the funding for the sidewalk prioritization? You said that there was other funding. Is that discussed in the fall?
Michelle, this is Tina Hine here. Can you just say that question one more time? You're a little soft there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the sidewalk prioritization study, is that the funding that was anticipated in the fall? Is that same funding that was discussed in the fall?
Right. So I think John was speaking to the fact that the sidewalk prioritization plan is a separate entity, which is tied more so to the water asset management plan, and that through the work from this plan, we will come to understand if there's capital funding available from Complete Streets, from Safe Routes to School. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but the conversation, if you're referring back to town meeting in the fall, was whether or not Complete Streets could fund a sidewalk prioritization plan. Right. And the answer to that is, the answer to that is no. That's not the purpose of the technical assistance offered by Complete Streets. So the answer would be a no, although Complete Streets can, in part, provide some of the capital funding for some of the work that would be recommended out of the sidewalk plan.
Right. You need the plan to get the sidewalk improvement grant.
Okay.
That helps?
In a way, it helps. Okay. And then the I've lost the train of thought. I'm sorry. And then the water supply for study. What is the timeline for something like that, start to finish? Is that something that DPW or EPA? What is their involvement from the time of the study until like you can have a well? Is that like 3 years, 10 years? what is the process of that?
Okay, it's a great question. I don't know that I'm qualified to answer it because that might be more Sean Reese's world, but looking at what Stantec has produced in your handout, what they're going to do is conduct a survey of available supplies in our aquifer system, Michelle. It's a long, drawn-out process. I know it's measured in years before you obtain a bona fide well water source. But all of this is done, as you can see under bullet number 3, with Mass DEP Water Management Act permits and registrations. You probably want a better answer on the timeline, but unfortunately I think the study needs to kind of get its hands around what our aquifer capacity is and how we can draw from it before we can get an idea of how fast it can come online.
Yeah, because one of my concerns is I wonder, because I know that our ability, our constant water bands is not based on how much water we have in the aquifer. It's based on how much our drawing capacity is based on our number of wells.
You're right.
So one of my concerns is if we don't do something, houses keep being built and we can't pump more. So my concern is if we don't have more wells, we're just going to get into a cycle of this happening every year. So when I look at the thing, that is something that we do have to do. The other thing to me, I was in the foundry years and years and years ago, and years and years and years ago, I was afraid that roof was going to fall on my head. So, I mean, literally, I'm talking about when I was on the Board of Health. So what was that, 20 years ago? It was in bad shape. But the water supply source study, to me, seems like that should be the number one thing just because of the time of start to finish.
Yeah, and I'll just interject here that Sean has said previously that it's 5 to 10 years from start to getting a new well online. At least he said typically closer to 10. So
yeah. This is Jeff Ritter. I would also agree with Ken, but I would think that if it was approved in June of this year, it would be 5 years for it to get online.
Well, assuming that there's some place to put a well, too.
Well, that's part of what that's one thing I was going to ask about, right? The source water study, while it's essential to determine what our current capacity is, the real purpose of a source water study is to identify where you're going to look for your next well. So that's this is only a $15,000 study, but I'm wondering whether the data will be useful, but what I'd like to see come out of a source water analysis is where do you put the next well?
Right, you're assuming that there is some place.
Right.
So, okay, yeah, that's all I have to say. I mean, before you grant your next building permit. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell?
I'm all set. Thank you, guys.
Okay, Ms. Nersessian?
Thank you.
Aside from the source water study and potentially the building, which we've heard, I guess I understand that it's not in the best of shape, but I have heard that it is satisfactory for our needs. So I'm still struggling a little bit on that. I think we've heard that in past discussions, so maybe it's degraded in the past year, but we have had conversations about this in the past, especially when it came up last year. But I think what I'm really struggling with right now is how these were decided, and again, taking the water study out, that these were critical needs for the town at this time. I mean, I'm reading, the unemployment rate claims, last week were 3.3 million, which is 4 times the amount in the last 50 years. I mean, it's astronomical, where we have people who have their job, significant pay cuts, our businesses in town are flailing. They're either closed or their revenues are down significantly. And to add to our taxpayers' burden on something that I'm really having a hard time as to how these are critical spend items at this time, aside from the water, which I can certainly understand that given the timeline. But I'm really just struggling as to how these became critical items. So could you maybe just talk about that?
Sure. I'm a little conflicted by some of the remarks there, because I can tell you that water infrastructure didn't become a critical item. It's been a critical item. I think there's been a widespread dialogue across town leaders for many years about what can be done as a result of years of neglect and years of inaction too. I recall Mr. Shada, I believe last fall, talked about his recollection that for years was no action done on water pipe replacement. The fact that we're only doing a mile per year right now, and we have 60 miles to go, should tell you that if we do nothing, you can expect frequent water interruptions and poor water quality going forward. An improved water main replacement plan provides for an efficient water supply system to our citizens in a safe and reliable way. The infrastructure is 75 years old for the most part, and the pipes that Mr. Reese has told us about are constantly failing. So, I would challenge you, Sue, to kind of assess whether or not you think water delivery is a critical item. Every budget, so you, I think, put your hand up and you vote for a contribution to the town's OPEB funding, because the town recognized that that's a liability that we have to fund that had never been tended to in past years. It's the same dynamic. We're trying to grapple with something that has been ignored for generations so that we don't be faced with water quality issues going forward. So it didn't become a critical item. It has been. And we're trying to tackle it in a responsible and planned fashion. I'm not going to debate tonight whether or not, the unemployment that has exploded over the last 3 months is more relevant than water pipe replacement. I think what we're doing tonight is laying the justification for putting it into an article, and then we're going to assess how this all shakes out when those numbers that fund all those obligations are more clear. So at the risk of sounding like I'm debating with you, I just wanted to state the water main improvement plan in some of these articles, they're nothing new. They're critical because they speak to our infrastructure and our need to invest in them. They're not sexy either. They're not schools or police stations or town halls that have gotten the attention over the last 20 years. If you don't do it, it's one of those things that you've heard all your life, pay me now or pay me later. Repairs are going up.
Right now,
But let me just, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the water. We are doing something on the water. We have been paying in and having pipe be updated. You're saying
Correct.
that you want to accelerate that.
That's exactly
And that
right.
there is a
Yep.
plan to how we would pay for that and how the town would pick up that cost.
This study will help us understand over a 10 or 20-year period how we can accelerate the water main replacement in a way that will help us, through a capital system, achieve that goal. I will add, Sue, that if we were able to do up to 3 miles per year under this type of plan, the original goal was to try and get it all done in 20 years. That's not feasible. We have to cut it back to 10 years to live within some manner of reasonableness. We can't have it all. Then we're going to achieve a great deal of cutting in half the water main replacement liabilities that we sit on right now. I believe that ignoring this kind of a problem is going to bite us in the ass big time, because at the end of the day, one of my predecessors said, if you sit on the Board of Selectmen and you don't worry about water, you're not doing your job. It is, people talk about property values, but it can go south real fast if you have an unreliable water delivery system. And we know that the pipes in the ground are approaching 100 years old soon. and we need to be doing something about it. So you're right, it is an accelerated program, and I might add, if we're able to achieve an override to get some amount of this work done, I would vote immediately to get rid of the water infrastructure fee. We wouldn't have both.
But it would be a significant cost to the town up until then. And we are doing something with the water currently. Again, it's just adding more to the tax burden in order to accelerate it at this time.
I might disagree with you because it won't add to the tax burden. I think this is what we talked about when we had our debt model discussion. The tax burden will be minimized at that point, if not gone. Our goal is to try and achieve some level of capital improvement during a time period where the tax burden is nil.
We're getting rid of debt, and we would be adding back debt, is my understanding. So
that is correct.
We would be, okay, all right. Okay, no, I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add one comment. I'll get you in a second, Michelle.
Okay.
One comment I wanted to add was, just to be clear, you made a comment, Mr. Cronin, that there was a water quality issue with the pipes, and that is not accurate. Okay, even Mr. Reese has stated very clearly the pipes need to be improved, and nobody disputes their age, but there is no water quality issue that results from the pipes being old. All the water quality issues, the brown water in parts of town, that's a source water issue, and that's what the treatment plant's dealt with. I just want to be clear so that people don't think that, I don't think it's fair to equate water quality with the pipe condition.
You're absolutely right. My remark was within the scope of discussing the chronic repairs and the quality of water people expect to have delivered to their homes. Can't get that if the pipes are breaking and otherwise compromised because of their age.
Right. When a break occurs, yes, there's an issue, but the quality of the water itself is determined by the source water, not the pipes. So, okay.
No,
okay.
Good point. Very great point. Yep.
Ms. Zimmer, I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that right now the 1 mile of pipe that's being replaced is with the $75 water surcharge, and it hasn't been determined if that process is doubled to 2 miles a year or whatever the determination is made. It hasn't been determined that that's going to be done with debt or any other tax, or if the surcharge will be increased, or if it will be an increase in water rates. That hasn't been determined. I just want to clarify that, right?
I think that's a statement, and I would agree with it, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ms. Nersessian, I believe you had the floor still.
Oh, no, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Alfred?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, back in the fall, we had a whole conversation about sort of the overall affordability of all of the projects that are facing the town, many of which are included in this sheet, but obviously the sort of the high school that the school department is looking for is sort of the, not to quote Ken, but the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And we were at the all board meeting, and we were sort of having some conversations about prioritizing, setting up a committee, and I'm not sure if that or a working group or whatever to discuss these. And you made a comment earlier that said, we're under the sort of impression from Dr. Jackson and sort of the schools that we're probably 3-5 years away, sort of from a school project. But then you're talking about doing projects that are going to require 10, 15, 20-year debt to be put on the town. And while maybe it allows us to sort of keep the sort of average tax bill the same, it certainly sort of takes away from the potential for town taxpayers to pay for the schools if they so wanted, when we don't really know what the sort of the priorities of the town are. Are they okay with doing a mile of pipe a year and paying $300 in fee for their water bill? And then they want a school, or do they want us to accelerate to 3 miles a year and potentially forego a school? We don't know answers to all these questions. So, and that hasn't changed. There's been no real work to sort of try to find that. So, and it's kind of distressing to me that we put all these things right back on the warrant. We don't really have any additional information, and we're going through a financial crisis right now. And you've got Mr. Ritter just sort of slashing up the capital plan without sort of any input from elected boards. You've got lots of people sort of going one way or the other. And so I think that I understand your point that maybe a bad week for jobless claims isn't something that we want to guide our entire forward-looking view with. Let's keep in mind that this week will be the same. Next week will probably be the same. I think it was Goldman Sachs was out saying that they expect unemployment to be 15% sometime in the second quarter. There are a lot of people that are hurting right now, and I think that spending $300,000 on a bunch of studies. Look, don't get me wrong. Our water infrastructure in this town is critical, but we are working on our water infrastructure. We've been spending on it. We've been improving it. We've been making some changes to it. This is I think is way over what we sort of should be paying for and looking to fund right now. I mean, Mr. Cronin, I realize you're going to vehemently disagree with me, and that's all right. But I'm not saying that these aren't maybe potentially necessary items, but there are a lot of things that are necessary that you just can't afford.
If I could just jump in for a minute, Dan, I think what I'd like to just add to this conversation is that there's not a lack of recognition that there is tremendous economic uncertainty right now. And I think our board last night demonstrated the willingness to respond to that, to keep a close eye on that, and to make changes week by week to address that. I think what you're seeing here with these articles, these 4 articles in particular, is similar to what you saw from the board a few weeks ago when we approved the SOI, which is to say that our eye is on long-term planning as well, and that's what our role as leadership calls us to do, is to address for sure the short-term economic uncertainties that this pandemic brings, and I think we are doing that, but also to not lose sight of the kinds of conversations that we were having just not even a month ago with the school committee, the finance committee, and the select board, which was to keep our eyes on a vision, on a strategy for the future. So I don't think there's anything in tonight's conversation that we cannot come back and revisit if we have worsening economic news in the next couple of weeks, months. I think what you're seeing tonight is a conversation about that focus on the long-term planning that really the select board and the leadership from your committee and from the school committee, wants to demonstrate to the town. I would just add that to this conversation. I'm going to put myself back on mute now.
I appreciate it, but I think that implies a lot more sort of collaboration between the select board and the schools, and I've certainly seen. I don't think there's been any sort of, I suggested, and I thought we were going to form a study group. So that's my knowledge that hasn't been done, and the study group would include members of the community from the schools, from the businesses, from all different groups who have different interests in town. There would be surveys that would be done in town, trying to, there'd be much more about what does this town want based upon sort of numbers that we can and can't afford. Because as I appreciated, and I mentioned this, you guys put together a list, sort of a cost of both and what it would add to the tax burden of the town. And it was pretty clear to everybody that there was no way the taxpayers of this town were going to support all of it. And yet you put all of your side on there, and the only thing basically missing is that 800-pound gorilla of a school project, which is frankly still more expensive than all of this and sort of the annual cost in debt going forward with huge amounts of assumptions. I mean, I get maybe that you're saying that you recognize the economic impact, but these studies on right now, and we're going to be looking at very likely big cuts in spending is frankly reckless.
Tina again. I would not go back in time at this point and change my decision to sign off on the SOI. I still would say today that is a good decision.
The SOI has
correct. Correct.
We understand from the SOI process that more likely than not, it's going to take 3 to 4 to some odd number of years for our SOI to even be accepted. And so you just kind of, the SOI is just kind of something you kind of got to do to keep on going, to get down the road so that eventually one day you're going to be accepted.
Not true.
While not spending any money.
Yeah, it's not really true, but yeah.
Well, okay, you can say that, but then that doesn't mean anything if you're actually going to. Why?
No, I'll tell you why. Because applying for an SOI 1 year has absolutely zero impact on subsequent applications. That's
Okay.
what I know
Fair
Mr.
enough,
Cronin
but
was
it still
about
has
to
no
say.
cost. If that's the case, and if you were to tell me the SOI was going to cost $100,000, I'd probably be telling you to put the SOI on hold for this year too. So I mean, I'm not. This is not like
Right.
I'm in favor of high school and not opposed to these projects. I'm just.
Yeah,
I'm just simply saying. The SOI is not.
I'm just making the comment that it's not a necessity to apply repeatedly. It's just that it takes, each year is independent, is all I'm saying. So yes, you apply multiple years because you want to get in, but it's not like they look at it and say they've applied for 10 years so they get higher priority. That's all I want to make clear.
Okay. We just need the bricks to crumble a little more.
Right, exactly. In some sense, yes.
Okay, but so that even makes my case even more though. But so the SOI then had a cost attached to it, I would not have been in favor of proceeding with the SOI, knowing that where we are financially and everything. But the SOI itself does not have the cost. Obviously, there is a cost to the study that would come after being accepted for the SOI and all that, but we're not there yet. So I mean, there's so much here that just we're not going to be able to do it all, and to spend now when we still don't have an idea of what the community wants. On top of that, we also know that we're going into a significant financial crisis. Again, I would strongly urge the select board to reconsider and at the very least postpone these until October, where we can have more dialogues with the schools, maybe have some more community involvement, and have a much better picture of the impact economically from the outcome of the coronavirus.
Thanks, Dan. I understand your comments. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Cronin first, and Ms. Hine.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dan if there was a question in there.
No, I was just on my soapbox for 20 minutes.
Okay.
No, I know. Well, I just wanted to see if it was something you want me to.
But stating my position and my urging to you to reconsider having these on the warrant for the spring or summer by the time we have the meeting.
I would echo Ms. Hines' remark. I think everything in this warrant will be reviewed, Dan, as the financial realities become more clear and known to us. But as we sit here today, these are planning discussions, and I think, again, to echo what Tina said, our board believes in future planning and commitments to the town that are important. I do want to call attention to a couple of remarks that you made to clarify them. This plan is not the same plan as the fall. It has flexibility built into it to provide for 10-year chunks of capital improvement. The one in the fall did not. It was a 20-year view. We recognize that we have a window here to share the capital burden, going back to a conversation I had with Sue, about these kind of improvements, pending capital improvement at the high school. We've been told when it comes to statement of interest with the high school that there are off-ramps associated with that program. If we ever run into a problem with our tax burden and any approved project, we can pulse the high school project to befit our capital needs. And finally, Dan, again, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at this report I sent you today, but I think you said it's a $300,000 commitment. It's $130,000, not $300,000. $19,000 additional would probably come from the water retained earnings.
I'm sorry, I was just adding up the numbers from the articles here. Some of which anywhere near we're not talking about now, but the cost was sort of similar to what it was for the articles in the fall. My
with the piece, yeah.
Okay, Ms. Hine, you had a comment you wanted to make?
I'm done.
Thank you, Ken. No, I was just saying I understand Dan's comments, and I appreciate him sharing them. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sparrow, do you have anything you want to add about these set of articles?
I've certainly had many conversations about them with Mr. Cronin, Ms. Hine, and Mr. Reese over the past few months. I just have just a couple quick comments. The first is that I do think it's important that we get the water right. it's part of our quality of life in this town, and we have to make sure that we do get it right. I was at a select board meeting a couple of weeks ago where someone was very concerned about the brown water, and I recognize it's related to the treatment plant. But the fact is just that we got to get the water right. We have to make sure it's right, and we have to make sure that we're providing the right water in the right way. I am no expert. I have no idea what any of this, what we need, what we're sure. I'm glad we're doing something. Are we doing enough? I don't know, but I just want to make sure that we think about it and that we don't, we got to be fiscally responsible. That's of course a very important part of what we do, but we also have to make sure that we maintain a reasonable quality of life in town and make sure that things continue to go well and we're in good shape. And I want to make sure that, the 1 mile a year or whatever we decide to do is the right way to go. And the second thing is that, that being said, one of the things that I am concerned about when it comes to these studies is, as we look towards cuts and things like that, which we don't know how much, we don't know where, we don't know how. And in my conscience, I can't really support studies if it means that people are going to be out of work in town. And I don't mean it from Sue's perspective. I think she has a great perspective when it comes to the unemployment rate and people trying to pay taxes. I mean it from our municipal employees. I don't want to see us put water study ahead of someone's job. I'm not saying we're going to. I just want to put it out there that I want to be careful how we structure our thoughts around budgeting to make sure that we're not we're thinking about things in the right way. And that's just my perspective, and that's really all I wanted to say. There's no question in there. It's just me grandstanding. I took a little less time than Dan, though. So if anybody wants to comment, that's fine. But that's all I wanted to say. So thank you for listening. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll take this opportunity, since we have so many people on soapboxes, to remind everybody to wash your hands to prevent the spread of this virus. So since we have so much soap going around today. Okay, anybody have any other comments on the study articles? Okay, then let's move on. There are a couple more that we need to go through in the warrant as it now stands. Now let's move to what is in the draft, Article 22, the Charles River Rail Trail. I had one question about that. This should be a relatively easy one, which is, why do they need $1,000 every year? When we bought a whole bunch of tools for them, we spent $5,000. I'm kind of confused what the $1,000's being used for. Good.
So I can just speak to that really quickly. I did reach out to Robert Wyneck, and I made him aware that the article was a placeholder for his committee, that they should discuss it at their next meeting. I think they're adapting to remote participation, have not yet had a meeting. Robert is aware of the need to get some information to both the Select Board and the Finance Committee on the status of that article. So if we can hold off on that conversation, that'd be great.
That's fine. It's just that, as I said, we had already given them money for supplies, tools, all that stuff like that. So it seems like that it's like there should be. The only comment I was going to make was, we funded a capital cost to enable this ongoing maintenance because it was being done by volunteers, right? So it just seems like if it shows up every year, it's not a capital cost, it's an operating cost. So what do they need on a yearly basis? So okay, we'll defer that.
I can get them that feedback. I'll give that to him.
Okay. On Article 23, which is the easement for the solar power, the question I had about that is obviously the financial implication, which is what is being discussed in terms of the agreement and what financial impact that might have on the town. Can that be shared at this point?
I'll give Mr. Ritter a chance to respond to that if he's still with us. Jeff, do you have an update to share?
I really do not. This is an agreement that was entered into with the fire chief and Sun Systems, I believe. And we just need to have a license agreement allowing for the solar panels to go onto the top of the fire station.
Oh, right. This is not Marshall Street.
Right. This is Central Street. This is the fire station. Yeah.
Yep.
So I was just wondering, because in the comments it just says the town will receive electric power credits to offset electric expenses at the fire department at a discounted rate. So I was just curious as to what the financial analysis was, or was there a financial analysis behind this one?
Well, I can get that information from the fire chief if you'd like.
Okay. Okay. He's actually on the video, so I don't know if he's on the audio, but okay. The community farm revolving fund, I think that's self-explanatory. They just want a revolving fund for the fees up there. We can talk to them about that. I mean, I know it's sponsored by you, but I can follow up with PJ or the advisory committee. Road acceptances we don't care about. The LED upgrade at Highland Street, High and Woodland. Obviously that's short money, and the one question I had about that, and obviously other members of the committee can chime in, is what is the expected, I assume we pay electricity for those signals, and the question becomes, what's the ROI on that investment in terms of the lower electricity usage for the lights?
Tina, do you have any information on that?
All right, I'm right here. I checked out on that. Can you repeat that, Ken?
Okay, for Article 27, which is the LED lights for High and Woodland Street. I keep saying Highland.
Oh, sure.
Right. I'm just wondering what's the ROI. It's short money in the sense it's only $57.40, but I'm wondering what's the payback period, because presumably we're paying for electricity for the lights, and we should see a reduction in usage, a significant reduction in usage if we're going to LED upgrades.
Okay, so I think that may be a wording issue. This article may need to be revised. As I recall, this is a failure of the signal cycling at the Woodland Street and High Street intersection. So we got some feedback a couple of weeks ago, months ago now, to say that it was cycling through with a pretty high failure rate. And so this, I believe, is a repair cost.
Okay, I don't want to, given the small amount of money, I don't want to spend too much time on this. But the question I would have for you to ask you to follow up on is find out if it is a repair cost for sure, because it definitely does not say that. Right? It's a signal LED upgrade, right?
Right.
But the other aspect of it is when you say it's short cycling or something like that, you say light failure. Is it just that the light cycle needs to be adjusted, or is it an actual failure in the hardware that's causing some kind of a traffic issue?
So now, I mean, this is definitely back in the recesses of my memory right now. I believe that it was a hardware issue, and we needed to get out there. What is it? Central Signal, whatever the company is that we use. I believe that we needed to have the hardware repaired. Let me get you some more information on this one, okay?
Okay.
Ken, what number is that?
27 in the draft you just sent out.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Chief Cassidy.
Yep. Go ahead, Chief Cassidy.
Yes, that was something that was discovered when they were installing the traffic management equipment at Washington, Woodland, and High, and the contractor noticed that there had been a lot of failures, as Ms. Hine indicated, and it is a structural issue. And although it says LED upgrade, that's because the existing fixtures are halogen, and it was their professional opinion that by upgrading the older equipment that would be more compatible with the newer controller, that it would solve that problem of the failure. So it really wasn't going to be an energy savings issue. It would be de minimis savings. It's really an issue of reliability of the controls working. It's basically like trying to watch a Blu-ray DVD on a black and white TV. The controller is more advanced than the older light fixtures that we have, which is why we get a lot of failure.
So if they are halogen, though, I would expect that there would be a non-minimal savings, right? These lights are operating 24 hours a day, and halogen burns a hell of a lot more power than LEDs do. So while that may not be the intent, that should be a byproduct of this, right?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see a savings in our energy costs, but certainly not like you're going to save that $5,700 this year.
Yeah, no, I recognize that. I'm just more curious as to what the actual thing is. So really, it is a repair for the signal, but at the same time, that will be an energy efficiency upgrade to the light.
Correct. And when it was brought to the attention of DPW Highway Division, they said, "Hey, we'd love to fix this, but have that kind of money in our operational budget," which is why it was put in as a capital report.
Okay.
I just have a question from a procedural standpoint. Why is it a separate article versus part of capital?
Well, this would not be capital if it's a repair, right, Mr. Murphy?
But the chief just said capital, so
But it's under $10,000.
basically a replacement. So
Yeah, well, that's one option, right? If it's something we decide to support, we can put it under the capital article. It is under $10,000 though, so we have to have that discussion.
I can do that.
Okay, and let's see, I think, is that it? Let's see, 28 is stormwater. More, yeah, well, the other, oh, that's the planning board, okay, so the radio improvement project, the 100,000, Article 30. Okay, this is the one to basically improve the radio communication because we have the weak spots and the bad spots in town where the radio repeater doesn't work well.
So, Ken, this is Jeff.
Yep.
I have recommended that this be removed from the warrant, and we also have concurrently a request to the state legislature for an additional appropriation. Obviously, we have no idea whether or not that's going to happen, but I recommend it to the board that this be removed from the warrant at this time.
Okay. But the issue does exist though, right? That we have the radio problems in town with our public safety radios?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely. The issue exists as it has existed for probably a dozen years.
Okay. Now, what was the basis? I know you suggested removing it. What was the basis for the $100,000 cost? Was that based on discussions with a provider that said that's what it would cost? Was that a firm quote?
Yes. The fire chief could probably address this more accurately than I can, but that's based on a firm quote.
So the Chief Cassidy here, the way that number was arrived at, we did have a vendor come out and do an engineering study, and the initial appropriation that we got, an earmark from the state legislature, we thought was going to solve the problem, was insufficient because the quote that was based off of was done very quickly without doing an engineering study. They went out, they did propagation studies, they planned sites from antenna to antenna, and this would be a very comprehensive solution. It would include adding equipment to several water towers throughout town and using a microwave link to be able to ensure that there's a consistent and reliable signal throughout town, including in some of the areas right now where the signal drops off and officers cannot communicate that to the station or to other members of the public safety team.
And Ken, I would just say that this is a very important project. I probably would put it in the bucket of emergency requests because it's putting our public safety personnel in danger, and they're not able to respond appropriately.
Yeah, I understand that. That's why I was interested in this one. The other question I have, and this is probably more for Chief Cassidy, is we've had, over the last several years, we've replaced all the radios in town, and one of the comments we had in that discussion was about the digital versus analog radios and the compatibility with surrounding towns and so forth. And I remember having this discussion with Officer Denman when he was with us, part of the force, about moving to the higher quality digital signals and that kind of thing. So one of my concerns from a technical perspective on this is, are we still moving in that direction? Because the last thing we want to do is spend, if we move forward with something like this and we fix the problem, we don't want to end up in a situation where we're then forced to buy inferior radios, in a few years when we go through the next radio cycle.
So the comparator and the equipment that would be installed on all of these water towers is all compatible with the existing repeater, which is in dual mode and will enable both analog as well as digital transmissions. The police department right now, especially when they get into these areas where the signal drops off, they do frequently switch over and transmit on the digital side of their repeater. So all of these upgrades will be both backwards compatible as well as moving forward will be able to function in both analog as well as digital.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Ken.
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Alfred.
Chief, just a question, and I'm pretty sure these are completely different systems, but AT&T's just wrote, has been installing the FirstNet, first responder network. Now that's a cellular system versus your sort of radio system, right? So there wouldn't be there would be any technology that they would have rolled out that we could use to bridge the gaps, right?
Correct. The FirstNet system is more data packets, so that would allow the transmission of video as well as other non-just voice signal. So they're on a different spectrum than we are, and that's more designed to integrate with either a handheld device or, as you said, a cellular device.
Okay, I just wanted to check. I was sure that was the answer, but just in case.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about this one from the committee? Okay, then I think the last one we have is the Traffic Advisory Committee Enforcement Equipment, Article 31.
Yeah, so this is Tina Hine again from the Select Board. So I spoke last night about the recommendation to have this held off until the October town meeting for a variety of different reasons. One of the bigger one being that the police department was awarded a $16,500 grant that kind of came out of the work of the Traffic Advisory Committee. That grant award period has been pushed off to October. And I think once we start working on that grant, we're going to have a much better idea. This was a placeholder article, so the $40,000 does not represent a real number. And then once we start working on that grant program, we'll have a much better idea what we would possibly need additional money for. So we're going to push this one off, Article 31 for the fall town meeting.
Okay, good. Then we have no further discussion. I think that's it. If I look at the draft warrant, that's the last of the Select Board sponsored articles that had money or financial implications attached to them. I guess at this point I'll just go through the committee one more time and open the floor up for anybody who wants to make any comments about anything we discussed on the article side. Is there any further questions, any further comments on that from the Finance Committee?
Kenneth, Sue, Jeff had made a number of recommendations. Does the Select Board know when they'll be taking those into consideration and we'll see an updated version?
The answer to that question is yes. I shared that recommendation with the board last night.
Okay, so is this on, I mean, what I guess this maybe for Jeff or somebody like one of the Select Board members. What do you think your timeline is for getting it on an agenda to take up in terms of revising the warrant?
It's on the agenda.
If I could, excuse me, Jeff. Ken, that's a great question, and it goes to something that I wanted to ask your committee about tonight. Given the extension of town meeting until early June, do you expect your schedule to change to allow us the time to make these decisions? In other words, we were going to have to close the warrant, I think, April 13th. That time frame is now shifted. Do you and or your committee envision us collaboratively having more time to assess these decisions while the financial pieces we talked about tonight unfold?
Absolutely. We from our perspective, right, and we haven't discussed this, right? This has not been, we've just been doing budget reviews. This was, our plan next week was to start, we had to finish the budget reviews. Yours was the last one, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting today. Our plan for next week is to have our first discussion as a committee on our assessment of what we want to do and what things we may want to adjust going forward. Obviously, as I said in discussing the state's process, we know that there's going to be a revision to that as well coming. So for us, we will definitely be delaying our budget recommendation to get as much information as possible, right? Because we're going to need that. So yes, you have time to do it, but to a certain extent, obviously, we don't want to take advantage of the delay to wait till the last minute. So yes, we'd ordinarily have to have our report done, in a few weeks. That we'll probably target getting that done closer to near the end of May at this point.
So I think, we'll work with you towards that end, but I mean, speaking for myself, I would think that my board would like to enjoy that amount of time to assess the conditions as well to make decisions on what gets into the warrant. I know that doesn't give you a clear date on when we'll make the decision, but I think it might help you understand what our thinking is. Is that sufficient?
So that's helpful, and I'm glad that you are continuing, like the longer the period that you can do and deliberate and watch what happens, I think is to the town's benefit. So that's fine. Maybe as you know more, if you could just relay that over, that would be great.
We are, as Mr. Ritter indicated, we do review the warrant weekly, and I expect Jeff will keep putting that under our nose going forward.
Okay.
Ken, can I just ask?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Zemer.
Comment something?
Go ahead.
Okay, Michelle Zemer. John, next week we have executive session to discuss collective bargaining. Would you or your board have anything to add about your two contracts that you're discussing, that you're negotiating?
We might have a little, not a lot, but a little. So I think it would be great to collaborate with you about that and maybe learn something. But we've been making some way, with both collective bargaining agreements. We've begun an initial dialogue with the police chief on his contract. And also, I've been in touch with your chairman about the town administrator's salary for FY21. So I think it would be a productive conversation if you'd have me. I'd love to participate.
Okay. Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome to. Right. I posted the agenda today hasn't been posted yet, but I sent it in to be posted today with executive session to discuss the collective bargaining agreements. Right. We want to have the discussion with the school, but obviously, to the extent that someone from your board may want to attend and give us an update on your collective bargaining situation, that would be helpful as well if you had any information to offer.
Thank you.
Okay. So you're set, Michelle?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions on anything we've discussed for the select board? Because I just want to give them the opportunity to depart if we're done with them.
Hey, Ken, it's John. I just have one other thing to add. We've asked Mr. Ritter to discuss an item with our town accountant relative to the sustainability coordinator. As you know, the funding for that position expires into this fiscal year from the legislature.
Yep.
We've made it clear to Mr. Zedek, who is our sustainability coordinator, we've got to work on a model that pays for his own position. He's achieved that. He's got a significant amount lined up as reimbursement coming from our aggregated contract with Colonial Power, and he's got some other ideas to fulfill the salary requirements in FY21. The question is, will he need his own revolving fund to accept the funds from those sources to pay his salary in FY21? Jeff was posing that to Sharon. I put it out to you and your committee as a placeholder. It's not in the warrant yet.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if it has to be, but I don't want that to fall through the cracks.
Yeah, well, I think we just have to make sure we can do that, right? If that's the way it can be done, then that's fine. I'm not 100% sure that a position like that can be funded entirely from a revolving fund. If it can't, and again, we have...
It's a contract, not a...
Oh, it's a contract.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, then I think we're okay. I thought it was a staff, employee position. I was like, that would make it a little tougher.
Negative.
So, okay. Okay, then that's good. Okay, well, just again, that's something to keep us posted on, right? Certainly from our perspective,
Yep.
our viewpoint on this was in line with what the select board had said about it being self-sustaining. So to the extent that it is self-sustaining, that obviously impacts our certainly would impact our discussion on the position, right? It's kind of goes without saying that if it's self-supporting, then we're probably not going to, I doubt we'd be thinking of negative action with regards to that. So, but that's something we haven't discussed yet.
Just FYI, I'm waiting a response from our town accountant on that.
Okay. Well, let us know when you have it.
Yep,
So.
I will certainly do that. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments for the select board, or from the select board? Okay. If not,
I want to thank you guys for all the work you do. I know it's the busiest time of year, so thanks very much for listening to us tonight.
Yep. No problem. Thank you for giving us all the information. I mean, this is the kind of thing we need to do to make sure we have the information we need when we start making our recommendations. So, okay. So select board members.
Here.
Jeff.
Yep. Same comments. Thank you.
Okay. So select board members and Mr. Ritter, you're free to go if you would like. Remainder of the committee, hang on. Mr. Cassidy, since you're on the line, could you want to give us an update on anything related to the pandemic that we may want to be aware of from the financial side that occurred since our last meeting?
Sure. So I've got some numbers preliminarily of expenses that I've been able to track so far. They're with month ending shortly. I'll be able to run a report through Munis. But right now, I've spent about $2,500 in personal protective equipment. The technology department spent a little under $600 for technology to allow remote work to take place. The public schools spent just shy of $22,000 on technology, which was Chromebooks as well as software to be able to manage additional Chromebook usage. And they've spent about $17,000 in food service costs since the schools have been shut down, but related to helping to address food insecurity, both students as well as other members of our community.
Okay, so we're at about $42,000. It sounds like.
Right, that we know of that I've been tracking. So I did a couple weeks ago when we first were starting to embark on this. I did let you know that folks like the police department had indicated that they would be doing extra cleanings. I haven't seen what those bills equate to yet, but I do know that they have definitely been doing some extra cleanings relating to their station and cruisers when they've either had a prisoner or just beefing up the frequency with which the station itself and the frequent touch spots are being cleaned and disinfected.
Okay.
Ken, it's Sue. Can I ask a couple
Yes,
questions?
go right ahead.
So, Chief, thank you for those. The $2,500 on the supplies, is that I guess that's a run rate over how many weeks?
That would be 2 weeks worth of orders.
2 weeks, okay. And I'm presuming, is that an approximate? I mean, can we sort of estimate that would be an ongoing cost, or does it spike or ebb and flow depending?
Well, a lot of it is going to depend on the supply chain. Part of that $2,500 was the purchase of equipment through regional cash. We were eligible based on our annual run volume. So basically, I was told, based on the number of runs per year, you are entitled to this amount from our cash, but you have to buy it. And so that was purchased in the amount of $721.50. And then the other $1,148 that I spent on PPE was a one-time purchase of some gowns and some masks and some face shields. So until I go through all of the supplies, I wouldn't need to purchase additional. I do have some feelers out to multiple vendors. I'm in line to get some N95 masks when those are ever available, at which point we'll be paying market rate for those. But I can't give you it's not going to be a linear, we spent $2,500 in 2 weeks, and 3 weeks from now we'll have spent $3,750. It's not that precise a science. When things become available, I try to jump on them as quickly as possible because the supplies are very limited.
Okay, no, that's super helpful. And then I'm presuming the $600 for the technology, that was a one-time cost?
Correct. So that was $450 for adapters and power cables and cables themselves, Cat5 cables, which allowed a lot of employees to take their voice over IP phone home, and so it left the power adapter at their workspace, for town hall or what other town building they're in, and that way they could just take the phone with them to their home, and so they've got those power banks and cables. And then that also includes the $50 a month fee for the power bridge, or the phone bridge, as well as the Zoom Pro account, which allows longer Zoom calls than would only be available through the free account. So some of those are one-time expenses, like the adapters. The phone bridge is $50 a month, and the Zoom will be $20 a month recurring cost until such time as we need to cancel that account or go back to free.
And if you don't know on the school side, then that's fine. But I presume that the $22,000 on the Chromebooks and software was a one-time fee, and then the food insecurity would continue, correct?
Yeah, that I can comment on too. That is correct. We've discussed that in our liaison meetings with the school committee.
Yeah, and it's $3,500 for 3 weeks for the food service, and it's $73.22 per week for the food service staff.
Right.
Good. And so the staff was in the I guess were both of these in the ongoing budgets for the school for the year? These aren't over and above, right? Because the staff would have been at the school if they were open.
Yeah, let me be clear about a couple of things here with regards to the employees at the school. Just from, again, the school committee is the ultimate authority, but I can tell you what we've discussed with them, right? You're correct in saying that these things are in their budget ordinarily. However, there are a very small number of employees that are funded from the revenue that they generate. For example, you have the extended day program that people pay for, right? Which obviously they're not drawing revenue from right now. So there are employees that are in this situation where the school department has to make a decision whether to pay them or not while the schools are on hiatus, because they don't have the extended day money coming in. Same with some of the food service staff's the same situation. Ordinarily, they're making lunches and collecting money for, they're paid partly out of the revenue that's generated from the food service. Without school being in session, they're just basically providing the free lunches to the free and reduced price, citizens, children in town. So the revenue from the full price meals is not coming in anymore, and so there's some percentage of that. While all of this was in their budget, there's some percentage of that was based on anticipated revenues that are no longer happening.
That makes sense. The revenue side is down, but the cost is flat.
Right. So.
Okay, that's super helpful. We think that there are other school-related costs that haven't come in as well. I know, Chief, you had said you were waiting for a couple invoices. Are there other school-related things that we know of?
This was everything that Dr. Jackson had given me as of last week. I can reach back to him and verify that there haven't been anything beyond these ones that he'd sort of given what the ongoing costs would be in addition to the one-time costs.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
Yep, good.
Michelle Zemer, I have something in my notes that there might have been some kind of a directive from, I want to say DOE, but I know it's not DOE anymore. I know there's another acronym
right?
for it.
DESE.
Right, saying that the schools are supposed to continue paying all employees. Does that sound familiar?
I wasn't aware that there was an actual edict. I know we were told that. I haven't seen it. I don't have any reason to think it's not true. I agree with you. I think that's what they've been told to do. I do know that, there's some. I mean, that's a discussion. Obviously it's their purview to do that, but that I believe I think they were the ones that told us that edict had been given, but I don't think they showed us the actual document that said so. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if that is also, if it includes their employees who are paid through revolving fund. I don't know the details of it. I just thought I would throw that up. Okay.
Yeah.
Chief Secretary again, I had also seen some language, and I have to double check to see whether it came from the feds or whether it came from DESE, with regards to eligibility for the food, and it was not limited to just people who are on free and reduced lunch, that during this public health emergency that food assistance through the schools be available to any student and not limited to just people who normally would be eligible for it earlier in the year.
Yeah. So the bottom line is there's a cost associated with the food service program being maintained the way it is at the moment, right? That the revenue side is diminished or gone, and the costs are still there. So.
Right.
And whether or not money would be made available from the federal government to assist and offset some of those costs, or whether that would be just through the FEMA reimbursement process is yet to be decided.
Right. So, okay. Any other updates you want to give us on the pandemic spending, Chief?
No, just fortunately, none of our employees have any symptoms. None of them have needed to be tested. We have had a couple episodes where we had some interactions that were of concern, so we had temporarily sidelined some first responders, all of which were usually for less than 1 or 2 work cycles. So fortunately, we're trying to keep our risk exposure down and try to make sure that everyone's able to continue to work.
Okay, good. Okay, anybody on the committee have any other questions for the chief? Okay, and our last agenda topic for tonight is what I will propose that we should keep to be relatively brief, only because we'll have this discussion next week, but matters relevant to FY21 budgeting. I already gave the update on my call with Pooja yesterday about where the state stands. I just wanted to say in open session, I sent you the email today to the committee members with a revised version of the budget spreadsheet for FY21, where I started to plug in some potential scenarios. As far as the actual numbers we will plug into the model, we'll have that discussion next week as to how we want to modify our model. But I wanted to get people thinking about where things might be headed. So you saw from the spreadsheet that it's not looking pretty, right? If I had to guess from the anecdotal evidence that I've heard in terms of the economic damage at the state level, I would think that we should expect and plan for at least something like a 5% cut in local aid next year. Net local aid, who cares whether it's offset charges, whatever, just a reduction in net aid coming to us. And that's what I built into the spreadsheet. I looked at the requests we have. I left them as is because we haven't had reason to modify any of them. They're what the requests are. But I modified the model to factor in some of the new information we have now that we're at this point in the process. And you can see, you saw on the bottom line there that it's still not looking pretty. So I would just want to kind of put that out there. You saw my second email that basically added that I also assumed a cut in local revenue as a result of this of 10%. Between now and next week, I'll probably try to I will talk to the town accountant about revising our local revenue projection just based on, the breakdown. We have the detailed breakdown. I have it somewhere in my files of each component of the local revenue, and we'll probably sit down. I'll sit down with her and try to look at each one of those individually, look at where they were in 2008, for example, and try to anticipate, maybe refine the numbers I put in the spreadsheet that I sent out today. But I think that everybody on the committee should be prepared next week to have that discussion, because what we're really going to have to do next week, and I understand we don't have to finalize it next week because we can wait. We now have a little bit of time with town meeting being postponed. We have time to wait and see. But I think that from a planning point of view, I'd like to come to some kind of a consensus to where we say this is where we think things are going. And while we don't have to take concrete steps now because we have some time to wait, how would we address these shortfalls if they manifested the way that the model says they will. as I said, we can defer actually taking action until we get into May when we have to make decisions. But I think that it's going to be very helpful for us to have that, kind of the plan of action in place to say if this turns out to be as bad as we think it is, here's how we're going to close the deficit. So.
Michelle
Yes.
Beamer here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we should be going back to departments?
Well, I think that's a discussion we have next week. When we crunch the numbers and we look at this model and we have a consensus on where we think our best guess looks. When we do this back in November, we're taking our best guess, and then we formulate a guideline and we go to the departments. I think we're just going to redo that best guess with what we know next week, and then decide: is it something where we say, okay, we can close this? There are ways, and we've gone through the reviews. We've heard what every department has in terms of their requests and what we can take out. And depending on what we decide, do we just go back and pull out things that we've noted were non-essential things, or do we go back and say to every department, okay, everybody gets whacked to this and prepare a new budget, right? In some sense, they don't really need to prepare the budget because we know where the money would come out, right? So. But yeah, that's the discussion I want to have next week. If it's extreme enough that we want to go back to the departments and say, give us a new budget with these updated parameters. So.
Hey Ken, this is Ben.
Yep.
I also I like that. I think that's great. I was actually going to ask if we should send a letter to the boards who prepared budgets, but it sounds like it might be better to just wait till next week to see if we even have to do that.
Right.
But one thing I wanted to sort of point out and ask. This is something we should probably ask the town administrator, but I'd like to have him pull together a list of open capital projects and their status, and if anything's open and can be closed, have it closed and the money returned to the general fund. As I think there's some open projects, sometimes they leave this project open to sort of see how things shake out. And given the financial situation, I think it might be a good idea. I mean, I don't know the scope of it, but it might be something that we should know, like what's out there, for money like that could be returned to the town from these projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ken?
Yep.
This is Jeff. I can certainly do that, but I would also ask that question be asked of the school department.
Oh, we've already asked them that. Yeah.
Okay.
We in our liaison meetings, we have already we've given them more warnings than we've given to any. Given the size of their department, we've given them more warnings that there's going to be financial problems coming, and we've already told them to start looking at things and preparing for the negative impacts of this crisis.
Thank you.
Okay.
And next week, could we just plan, sorry, this is Sue, but could we just then, I'm sorry, you weren't finished. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, no, I had a couple other things, but if you have
go ahead.
something else.
No.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Sparrow. Finish first, and then we'll go to Sue.
What I just, Ken, when you get that information from Sharon, could you share it with at least me, if not the committee? I'd like to see some of the numbers that are being thrown around.
Yeah. I'll give you the breakdown, and I'll also update the spreadsheet and send out an updated spreadsheet.
Okay, and then the last question I had was, did you sent that letter to the school board and the select board about spending freeze?
No, I communicated directly verbally. I talked to representatives of both boards and said, this is what we voted, so take action. And then the response was yes, duly noted. We will look into that.
Okay, great. I want that's all. So thank you, Sue. Appreciate it.
Okay. Sue.
Yeah, well, I guess further to Ben's comment, could we find out what spending is frozen? That I think would be helpful.
Well, yes, Mr. Ritter's on. I will tell you that what's happened is there has been a communication that has gone out to all the departments saying, don't spend money you don't have to spend. And what that has resulted in, at least from what I've seen crossing my desk, is some departments writing to Jeff and saying, okay, I have to buy pencils. Should I buy them? That kind of thing. So I do think that the departments are scrutinizing things now. I don't know to what extent that's occurring across the board. I've just seen some of this anecdotal emails going back and forth. And I think that in many respects, that's what they're doing. They're asking for Jeff to make a decision as to whether it's considered essential or not. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to
Okay.
comment more on that.
No, I think you're accurate on that statement.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. The other thing next week when we go through this, could we just lay out a new timeline as well in terms of when things need to be in and when I having trouble in my head and just sort of understanding the new dates and everything. So maybe we could just lay out everything as well.
Yes, and that's part of the whole discussion, right? When I said that we're going to decide how to proceed, that's part of the discussion, is how we're going to schedule these things, how long we're going to wait before we, when do we want to ask, do we want to, if we decide we need to ask for new budgets, when do we want to get them by? We'll have that entire discussion with town meeting now being, June 15th. I think that from a technical bylaw perspective, right, that would push our deadline. If you factor in the weekend we always factor in, then that would mean June 5th we'd have to have our report published. So that's usually the 10-day deadline. That gives us, it doesn't mean we have to wait till then, but I'm saying that would be the ultimate deadline for a June 15th town meeting. So we'd have, 2 months and a couple of days to get our, get everything lined up. But we can discuss the actual schedule on how we want to implement that going forward next week.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, anybody have anything else relative to the budget process for this week, or do you want to save it all for next week? Go home and cry over the numbers you saw today, and then yeah. So anyway, okay. Well, if there's no more discussion on that, we'll as I said, we'll do the detailed dive next week, which as I mentioned, we were already posted for. Or we should be posted for in the morning. Does anybody else have anything else they want to bring up before we close for this evening? Okay, I don't hear anything. Therefore, I will entertain the motion.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Alford.
Second by Vin Murphy. Oh, Tim beat me.
Okay. That is not subject to debate, but that also requires a roll call vote because we're operating remotely. So I will go through the list. Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian?
Aye.
Mr. Alfred?
Most definitely aye.
Mr. Sparrow?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote aye. Therefore, the motion is unanimous. That our meeting is now adjourned. That concludes the Tuesday, March 31st meeting of the Finance Committee. For those of you who have spent your third consecutive week watching me sit here staring into the phone and my computer for a couple of hours, thank you for joining us. As you just heard, our next meeting will be next Tuesday, April 7th at 7 p.m. under the same conditions we're under now. But for tonight, we're done. So everybody stay safe, wash your hands, and we'll see you next Tuesday.